started. Thanks for hurrying over from lunch. This is a session that gives us some insight into the experience of dyslexia in the classroom. Two of our middle school students who have dyslexia, and they have been gracious enough to give us some insights into their experience as K-12 students and as beginning college students, and Abby, advanced college students. So we met Sarah Chinchko, and this is Abby Rissinger.
Hi, nice to meet you guys. I go to Millersville. I'm a senior this semester, and my major is media and broadcasting with communications.
And so what I'm going to do is start with some general questions about when did you find out you were dyslexic? What kind of help were you given? How did you feel? You want to start, Abby?
Sure. So for me, we kind of caught it early on. A lot of the early detections I had is that I couldn't really write like everybody else could. Like I'll never forget, I did transitional first grade as well, and I was sitting in this classroom, and the teacher was like, oh, like everybody like write this prompt, and I didn't know how to write like everybody else, so I just scribbled and made them look like letters, and then she called me up to present, and I just kind of started making stuff up. And I told my parents about that. My parents were like, huh, you should probably be able to write by now. So that's kind of what started the process. And I just had like a lot of testing involved. Yeah, that's kind of the start of it.
I was diagnosed, I think I was 8, but I started really, or the symptoms of dyslexia really started being apparent in 5th grade, so when I was 6.
How did you feel when you got diagnosed?
When I first got diagnosed, I didn't really know how to feel. I remember being in special ed for the first time and really loving that the homework was easy. Did not like 4th grade regular spelling homework. But for a very long time, I thought dyslexia was something to be ashamed about, so it was something that I kind of hid, and I would like run to the special ed classes thinking that that wouldn't cause, or that would be more discreet. It wasn't. But I think for a very long time I was really ashamed about having dyslexia and having that diagnosis, but I knew it was something that I struggled with, so it was kind of conflicting to have to know that this is something that I was going to have to take more steps to do, but at the same time, to not want to take those steps, it was really challenging.
Can you tell us a story about your experience as a person with dyslexia that would provide some insight into your experience?
So I think it's really interesting because one thing I've noticed is we always talk about the language aspect of it and the language and the academic aspect, but we don't really talk about how that kind of affects you as a person. And having dyslexia, it's really, really hard because you don't learn like everyone else, but at the same time, sometimes you don't think like everyone else. And it took me a long time, but now that I'm in my senior year of college, I'm seeing kind of what a blessing that is, because I can do things and I can come up with things the way that other people can't. Since I'm so used to thinking outside of the box because of my disability, I'm able to solve problems in ways that other people might not even think of. So yeah, that's been pretty cool.
So for me, I think one story that really kind of tells a little bit more about gives a little bit of insight about dyslexia is actually something that happened like in this semester in the fall, which is I was taking a test for one of my classes, and it's written. I'm not great at spelling, so I sounded it out because that's what you're taught to do as like a 1st and 2nd grader. And it was like surfaces, so I spelled it like S-U-R-V-A-S-E. My teacher really pointed this out and asked me to spell it out loud, not trying to make fun of me. He was a very nice person. But as I spelled this out, the person next to me kind of didn't realize that I had dyslexia, so he turned to me and just kind of looked at me and asked me if I was a foreign exchange student. To me, I didn't take offense. because I was just like, okay, I'm dyslexic, I know that it's hard for me to spell, but to me, like, I don't think people really realize that having that challenge with spelling and just spelling it out phonetically, that's like linked to dyslexia. As for me, that was okay to hear that, and I was just like, I could laugh at myself because I've had so many times where I've just like misspelled things. But for other people, that might have gone a very different way. So I think that just in terms of spelling and people's understanding of dyslexia, I think that gives a little bit of insight.
In terms of people's understanding of dyslexia, I'm sure you've been through health classes throughout your K through 12. Did any of the health classes talk about learning differences or neurodiversity or mental health in any way, kind of touch on what some of the struggles that you were going through in any other class?
Oh no, not at all. My high school, I think I had maybe one health class. I graduated without sex education, which I'm still baffled by. But they never talked anything about like learning differences. I was actually really lucky because when I was struggling in elementary school, my parents found this school called Crossroads. I don't know if anybody was familiar with that, but it's a school that I was able to go to, and it was mostly just for kids with learning disabilities. And there I was really lucky because I was surrounded by people who kind of thought like me, and I was able to learn better because just the way that the public school was teaching me, I couldn't read at all. I wasn't able to read. So coming back from that, when I came back from that school, they taught me, I believe it was the Wilson method, and I went in like 3rd grade, I think? No, 2nd grade, barely able to read, and then I left 4th grade and I was on like a 12th grade level. So it just kind of shows all the things that can happen when you do learn about that and when you're able to see other methods, as opposed to just, oh, this is the way we're doing it. If you don't know how to learn this way, that's a shame.
A lot of my health classes did not talk, or none of them talked about disabilities of any type or learning differences for that matter. We learned a lot about like, the basic kind of like anxiety and some mental health disorders, but we really didn't touch on differences in neurodiversity, which is really a shame because a lot of people are neurodiverse in some sense or another, and I feel like we don't understand that.
What other things do you wish that people who are not dyslexic would understand about people with dyslexia? Give us some things that we should know.
I think for me, it's all about letting people have time. Because like being dyslexic, everything takes me longer. It's not just about spelling. I know that I need to take longer. I know that I need to organize my room once a week, or it's going to get hectic. I know that if I'm doing something that I'm not familiar with, it's going to take me longer to learn it than somebody else. So I think it's hard because I think people see that and they think like, oh, this kid can't get it right away. Like, is she stupid? It's not about being stupid. It's about needing that extra time. I always joke with my mom that my computer monitor, it just like loads a little bit slower. So normally, like people with dyslexia, they can get to where everybody else is. They just need that time and they need that support. And it doesn't make them less worthy of the education that everybody else has.
I really agree with that. I think that there's a lot of times where people don't fully understand that when you have dyslexia and you're in school, that it's not taking you like 2 hours to write an essay and then like an hour to edit. It's taking you 8 hours to write that essay and like 4 hours to edit, which people kind of like understate that, and they think, oh, well, it's just like you can't read as well and you can't write as well. But at least for me, it's not that I just can't read as well and I can't write as well. It's like I will sit down to read something and I will get so frustrated that I will literally walk circles around the book trying to avoid it. Like there will be kind of like, and I will like force myself to sit down and read it. And by the end of it, I will be in tears because it's so frustrating for me to read it and put all the energy and all the effort and still not be able to understand it. And I know that there's other places where I really excel at, but just having that difference where you're like, oh, I can do it. I can really I'm really succeeding in this one area, and I feel really passionate and about this one subject, and then go to your next class and just feel absolutely diminished and defeated. It just it takes a toll because it's constantly a back and forth, and you just don't know how to feel. And it's just, there's that aspect of dyslexia where it's not just, it's a struggle in the classroom, it's a struggle with your head, mentally. You're just, if it's not enough to have these times where it's harder to just be in the classroom, it's also your outside life and how you perceive yourself.
Dyslexia must affect you in all of your classes, and I think there's a misperception that dyslexia affects you in your English class, but it affects you pretty much in every class that you take. Can you give us some information about how your other classes have gone, especially at the college level, and what changes you think could be made to make the situation better for you?
Yeah, so along with dyslexia, I also have dyscalculia and dysgraphia, the big three, killing it. And in Millersville, for my major, you have to take one math class, and math is an area, English is hard for me, the spelling-wise. Reading mostly is okay, sometimes it gets a little bit frustrating, but math is where I have a really hard time with my working memory and my processing skills, so it's really hard for me to try and do a math problem because along with having to calculate it, I also can't remember the process to do it. And so I had to take a placement test. This was last summer. I had to take a placement test. All I needed was one math class, but then I failed the placement test. So then I needed 2 math classes. So I had to take Math 90 here, which was a class that I had to take for no credit that didn't apply to my major. I still had to pay for it. And usually if you just as long as you don't fail a class here, you can typically pass, but I had to get a C- or better. Now, last semester, all I did was work in this class. It was all I did. I would wake up in the morning, I would go to the math assistance center, I would leave when it closed, I would eat dinner, I would go to math class. That was my entire schedule last semester. And it was all I could do. It was all that I had to do, because if I stopped focusing on the math, I would absolutely lose it completely. I would do something else, or I would do math homework, I would come back, do something else, and I couldn't remember anything. It was so frustrating. So I think, and the thing is, I had talked to people about possibly being able to do other classes, but because I didn't do well in the math placement test, I had to take the Math 90. So it was an entire semester of just doing that. I remember I had a system of how I would take math tests. I got to be in a room by myself, luckily because of my accommodations, but I would have my paper set up. I'd have to set it up in a certain way, and I'd have to do all these certain things. I'd have to bring it would be a 30-question test, and I'd have to bring 90 pieces of paper, and I could only do one problem on one piece of paper. And mind you, this is 4th grade math, so I'd be going into the math assistance center with tutors who'd be like, yeah, this was really hard when I was in elementary school. And I'm like, I'm a senior, this is cool. But, so I'd do that, I would do the first test, I'd stretch, I'd go to the bathroom, I'd finish that, and it was the hardest I've ever worked in my entire life. But luckily I can say I passed the class, I got a C+, so I will be graduating this year. But then when I had to take my regular math class, I got to take Math and Non-European Cultures, which I got an A- in, because it was all projects and it was all about the history of math. So I just remember sitting there in this room by myself where I'm talking to myself and there's these stacks of paper, and I'm like, I'm a broadcasting major. It's kind of like a sick joke that they're making me do this. I'm still spending money. I'm not getting credits. I have to waste all this time on this, and I think that's something that really needs to change, especially with college level education, because I would have done absolutely fine in my other classes without having to do the first class. And I think they need to think of how brutal prerequisites can be, and if that's even worth it to the general thing. You know what I mean? So I think that's something to consider.
For me, I'm like Abby, don't struggle with math, but struggle a lot more in like other subjects. With reading, it's just, there's times where it's good and there's times where it's definitely really horrible. With history, especially like older writing, I have a lot of trouble. I remember in 7th grade when they introduced Shakespeare, and I think that's when I was just like, I'm done. After, like, there was a 3-year period where I was just like, I will read the text, but I don't understand anything at all. I'm not going to put in effort for this because I know I'm not going to understand it. And at a point, we started reading Frankenstein, and I was like, I started picking up on some stuff, and like that's when I was like, oh, I kind of like, I'm starting to understand this. And it was in a different format, I think, than our regular books that we were reading, because like the year before we had like read, what was it, Dante's Inferno in like the freshman year of high school, and it had so many historical references, and I was lost the entire time. Just being like, I remember that we read a book that there was a character by this name. I had no idea where to place him. But to me, it was really like, in terms of history, because a lot of it is just like memorization, and my like, I think you said like memorization was hard. Like that's hard for me in a different respect, in terms of with just like memorizing history. I've never liked history, but having that, especially embedded in like textbooks and literature, it's really hard for me. But I found that like I will have texts that I can read, and I have like, they take me longer, but I don't have as much of a problem with them. Especially like, I'm taking computer science this semester, and they chose a textbook that breaks it down into like every possible step, explains every possible thing. And I know I annotated a lot, but at the end of the day, I understand it enough when I go into the lecture the next day and he explains it, I like fully understand the concept. So I think that in terms of like history and even like the sciences, it really does affect you, because there's a lot of textbook reading, but it can also, like with the right kind of reading, it really helps to allow for an understanding of all things.
I noticed that there's a couple of people from the Writing Center here, and you both have said that you have dysgraphia. How does your dyslexia impact your dysgraphia, and how do you struggle with writing? And how can people help you with writing?
So junior year, I made one of the worst mistakes in my dyslexic life. I took a job writing articles for the Military Communications Department. That lasted about a semester. And it's hard because I'm always somebody who, I've enjoyed the act of writing and I really like it, but I can't edit, I can't see my own spelling mistakes. And it's really hard because I could go back and read line for line, but there's still things that I miss 1,000 times. So I've been to the Writing Center quite a few times, and it's always really helpful. They're always very patient with me when I go there, and I always really respect that. And I think it's just hard because it's a lot of, like, I know what it says in my head, so I can just read it as it is, but then I show it to somebody else, and somebody else is like, I don't know what this says. And with my job at the comm department, I didn't really realize how different I was until I was there, because I remember I was sitting, and we have like this computer lab, and I was sitting writing an article I was working on, and I looked at the person to the left of me, and I looked at the person to the right of me, and I was like, wow, they have a lot less red squiggles on their paper than I do. I didn't realize how people just write things without spelling errors. Like, I didn't know that was normal. I didn't know it wasn't normal to have like 15 spelling errors in a sentence. So that was just really interesting for perspective to be like, oh yeah, I am really different, but I'm really lucky to go to a college where there is that support for the Writing Center, because going there is really easy and it's really helpful, but at the same time, I've also been really lucky with all of my professors that I have here. And I think that's really because of my major. I know a lot of people get scared in college of like, oh, did they choose the right thing? But I know I definitely did, because for a lot of what I do, it's very project-based. It's very filming or interviewing or like recording and just really working with your hands and using editing software. So it's not as much of those papers of, oh, this needs to be spelled correctly or this doesn't make sense. I've always been really lucky to have professors that really work with me.
For me, because I've had like such, I think, severe dyslexia all my life, it's been really hard for me to differentiate between dyslexia and dysgraphia. From what I understand, like dysgraphia mainly affects like handwriting. So when I tell people that I have dysgraphia, people are like, well, your handwriting is actually really nice. And I've actually had people come up and say that my handwriting does look nice, but I've realized that the reason I fall behind in my notes so often is because I'm trying to make my handwriting legible, just like to me. And it like, for some reason it will bother me if it's not exactly nice. Like I'll go back and I'll fix it. But it just, for me, it just takes a lot more time writing, and it really, it's hard when you like are falling behind in your notes and you realize the teacher has written half a chalkboard and you're like half a chalkboard behind and you're like, oh, I gotta catch up. But then at the same time, the faster you go, the more mistakes you make, the further behind you get. So I think that that's, with the dyslexia and then trying to take notes, it's really hard because you're trying to deal with both things at the same time.
I have more questions, but I wanted to open it up now and see if you all have questions. Yeah,
I teach students with dyslexia, and first I want to say your speech earlier, Sarah, right? I think that's incredibly impressive. I don't have dyslexia, but I know from teaching how impressive that is, so good for you. And awesome just talking about it. I wish I could bring some of my students in here to listen to you guys, because it's admirable. So my question is, you know, Sarah, you mentioned earlier too, like you kind of hit a point where you were like, it was affecting your life so much, and that's when you kind of gave in to the strategies being offered to you and things. I think that's kind of what you were saying. So my question is, I teach a lot of students who I feel like are at that frustration level, you know, and I'm trying everything, you know, and my question is, like, from the teachers, and I know you said the nickname thing was great, I love that, but, you know, what else as teachers can, you know, what can I do to support the students, you know, because I try to create a toolbox of strategies for them to take with them, and I'm kind of with middle school age students, so I'm trying to have them take ownership and be honest that it is going to be hard. And I tell them straight up, I'm like, it's not going to be as easy as other people, you know, so what can I do as a teacher to help support my students?
Well, first of all, I want to say I really admire that you're like preparing them and not just saying, oh, it's all going to be okay, because it really is hard because you do struggle throughout the grades. One of the things that I found is sometimes when I'm kind of already in that stressed state, that when people are like even trying to offer things that are going to be helpful to me, I'm kind of like reluctant to take them because I'm like, oh, that's going to be more time. Like I already don't have this, and my brain's scattered everywhere. I think sometimes it's just more of a, like one of my teachers, Miss Turner, she would do kind of more, sorry, I'm trying to gather my thoughts. One of the things that has really worked for me in the past with teachers in terms of really being successful is breaking things down into the smallest possible pieces that they can be done. I know that with accommodations and things, me personally, and I've like known other people and babysat for kids with dyslexia, and I've seen a pattern of, no, I don't want this, no. just because it's like it feels like you're being singled out because like you're different and other people don't have to do it. But I think when people like initially start teaching and just breaking down all this stuff, it's a lot better. But for me, I think sometimes you just need to present it as not as a thing that's going to help you, but something that's like fun and that's like part of not only like almost not an option. Like it's like this is gonna be a fun project that you're gonna do. Because I know I will do it, and if it's more of a this is something that you have to do instead of like this is a goal, it's something that I'm more likely to do. I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, that helps. Thank you.
Abby?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, especially in middle school, because middle school is such a hard time for everybody, and especially having a disability on top of it. But I think a lot of it is also in attitude. I know for me, I didn't quite realize how hard I was going to have to work at that point. So I think it really is important for students to be like, okay, you're going to have to work on this. If you want to be successful, you're going to have to keep doing this. And you can tell your students, like, it might seem really hard now, but once they start to learn these strategies and get used to them, they'll notice that things do get easier. And they get easier because they know these strategies and they start to be able to practice them themselves. So yeah, a lot of it really is persistence, but as far as breaking things down, that is absolutely super helpful, because I know even for me, like, I'll find things if I see like a paragraph in text, like I can get super overwhelmed. So just being able to be like, here's the first sentence, here's the second sentence, and kind of just really breaking that down.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Another question?
On a similar level, but from the parent perspective of a young one, newly diagnosed with dyslexia, what could you go back and want from your parents? Or what could they have done? What did they do to help encourage you, to help teach you, to support you?
I think that what
I'm just like, yes. Or what should we not do? That would be a good one too. What should we not say or not do?
Well, one of the things that I remember as like a first grader is like sitting at the dining room table and doing spelling words for like hours on end, and just like feeling so defeated when I got that spelling test back and I like got 9 out of 15. So that's like, I think knowing that some of those things where it's just like, here we're gonna practice your spelling words, isn't gonna work. Like for me, I really love writing on whiteboards. That's really helpful for me. And I know at like the Dyslexia Center, they'll actually like have you texture your words and then like trace them. And that's really helpful. I think I was reluctant to do it because when I was in that program, I was 13, and I like to do that early. I think that's fun for kids. Once you're like a teen or a tween, you're kind of like, I don't want to trace a 5-letter word, and you're like, but I think that's one thing. Another thing is kind of exactly what you're doing, really getting a deep perception of dyslexia, or like a good perception of dyslexia, and really understanding what it means. Because I remember even like a few years back, my dad said something along the lines of, well, you don't really have that bad of dyslexia. And it was like, you've never seen me read a textbook, and you know that like I spent my entire weekend reading textbooks. So like it sometimes, like, because it's so hard, it kind of takes over your life. And people have pointed out to me personally, they're like, you need to do something other than look at this book. And I'm sitting there saying, I need to finish these chapters. And it gets really stressful. So I think just having that understanding of dyslexia, and also realizing that, hey, my child is studying this way and it's not working, but then kind of going and trying a new strategy for a while and realizing what that does, because I think I stuck to the same way of studying for a very long time when I was little, and I only really figured out what worked for me in high school, and that was like a very hard transition to because I kind of threw myself into it, and by that point it was really hard to catch up, so it was taking up all my time.
First of all, I want to just say thank you so much for coming today. Like, one of the first things you can do is start to learn more about what's going on with your child. So just thank you for showing up. That means the world. But also, I would say pay attention to what's happening to your kids in school. Pay attention to what the teachers are saying to them. Pay attention to, does your kid have an IEP?
Yeah.
Pay attention to what they want to do with their child's IEP. Because I know when I was in school, there were so many ways that the district tried to screw me over in every single way. They didn't want to pay money to give me the assistive technology I needed. When I first got there, they didn't want to let me eat lunch with everybody else. When I came back to my other school, yeah. I had a math teacher who told me to my face in an IEP meeting that I was faking my disability to get out of homework. Yeah. And I'm almost graduating college, so it doesn't matter, but.
I hope that teacher was fired.
No.
You should.
Huh? Yeah, throw my diploma in her face.
Yes. Yes.
But like, having the support of the parent to be able, because when you're a kid, you don't always understand what's happening. For instance, this awful strategy that they would do. Have your kid go to IEP meetings. That's the first thing. Even, I know I started going in 6th grade. It's just really good practice, but also so they're kind of involved in what's happening with them. But when I would go, the people in the room would try and compliment me to get me to feel good, so I wouldn't have to ask for anything. They'd go and be like, "Oh, you're doing great. You look at your hair. You're so pretty. You don't need anything, right?" Yeah, because they don't want to spend the money, and they're not going to want to spend the money. So you have to get in there and be like, "This is what my child needs." Another thing that my parents, kind of along the lines of what you were saying, I always had a study hall. And one of my favorite things to do in study hall is I love to go to the library. I would just put my headphones on, I would just look at the books, and then on Fiction Center, I loved it. It was my favorite thing in the world. And they wanted to try and take me out of that so I could do like math tutor, or so I could get math tutor full time. And my parents fought that so hard. And the district didn't understand why. They were like, "Oh, but she needs the help." And they were like, "She needs a break, and this is what she does to be able to take care of herself." So as much as support as you can give your kid, just make sure that the school isn't screwing them over, because they're going to try and do that. They absolutely are.
That was my question, actually. It was a nice progression as a teacher and also as a parent, and my children are middle school and high school, and I was going to ask about the IEP because I'm a little bit worried about once they finish high school, how will that affect them in college? So I was wondering how you've advocated for yourself after leaving your parents to some degree and your IEP, and how have you had to ask for help at the college level to make sure that you get what you need?
So that's really another thing that was good about going to my IET meetings, because I was learning how to advocate for myself. I was learning how to ask for what I needed. The most important thing that I think is making sure that all the paperwork is in. Get more accommodations than you think your child will need, because you never know. My roommate, 2 semesters ago, she got an awful concussion. She has this like loft bed. She wasn't paying attention. She looked up, hit the back of her head, complete concussion. She had to drop like 3 of her classes. She went in to try and get accommodations, and they were like, "We can't help you because like everything's already happened." They can't help you for like things that have already happened, so you need to set them all up beforehand. And it's really just about being able to have the confidence to know when to ask for help, and being able to practice of, oh, I have to go talk to my professors, and like that can be really scary. I'm sure, like I said, like I've been really lucky with my major. All of my professors have been really understanding, but I know that there are some professors who aren't necessarily understanding. So it's about being able to go in and be like, I'm going to be polite, but I know that I have a whole strong as to what I need to be successful, because I'm spending a lot of money to be here, so I need to make it worth it.
I think also it's just knowing what other accommodations you can have, because sometimes you can be really struggling. I think the last time I got like a full IEP test, I was probably like 14, but I've gone in multiple times, again, to do like smaller tests to show that like I didn't need time and a half, I needed double time. I needed that, and also I think my IEP last year, we added that I could record lectures so that in case I fell behind in notes, I could go back and fill in where I left off. So I think, to me, knowing that I also have other options, if I'm like, yes, I need that. Another thing that I would say, in high school, a lot of people who had learning differences would say, I'm not going to take the double time, I don't think I'll need it. The thing is, a lot of teachers and professors will let you out if you don't need the extra time. They'll be like, you're finished after 1 hour? Okay. But like, maybe you need only 5 minutes to finish. Take the time so that it's just, like the only time I think I haven't been able to leave early for tests that I've finished is in like SAT or standardized tests. So I think like that's a really good thing to encourage kids to do. It's like no matter what the circumstances are, set up the extra time. If you don't use it, you don't use it. But maybe it's a hard test. Maybe it's just like out of the blue. Maybe you're not feeling well that day. Then you have that as a backup. And I think that's really helpful to have, because I've had times where the test has just been hard and I'll be going through it multiple times. And it has really helped me to have that extra time to think through and process and organize my thoughts.
I have one question. So, Sarah's met my daughter Faith because she's upstairs. But, so Faith absolutely hates reading. And even to get her to, she's supposed to read like 15-20 minutes a day. And then at the end of the week, she needs to hand in a summary. And sometimes, you know, I'll read a book to her. There's such a fight the whole week to get her to read. But what suggestions to try to get her to read? What do you have?
I remember when I was a kid, I loved crafts, always have, I still do. My mom, we'd find like a craft that I really wanted to do, and she'd be like, okay, you have to finish this, this, and this, and then we'll do this together. And that really helped me because I was just so motivated. So I would guess find something that your kid really loves, and then be like, and just incentivize it.
All right.
Yeah.
I think also, like going off of that, like reading books about things that you really like, or like just certain, like for me, certain types of text are better. So I'm better with like more stories instead of facts, or there's just certain, but sometimes even verbally, at least for me, it's hard to kind of process those things depending on the words that are being used. So sometimes it takes a little bit more time. I don't know exactly how to get it not to be like a fight, because I feel like with dyslexia, you kind of always like trying to do your best, but you also have this fear of failing. So you're like, if I don't try, I can't fail. And it's kind of like that disconnect, and you don't really realize that you're doing it until like years later. But I think just really, I mean, try to make it as fun as you can without like giving off the fact that you're doing it, because once you know that your parents are like trying to make it fun or whatever, you're like, there's something about it. I hate to tell that to a group, or like a room full of like parents and teachers, but there's something about like, and sometimes it just takes a little bit of time to like process that like your parents are right. They're not always right, but they're sometimes they're right. But I think that kind of what you said, trying to make it as like an incentive of like, we can do this, but also just trying to pick the best books that you can, that hopefully that she'll kind of latch on to, certainly fantasy books I know that are fun. I recently, it's like a 6th grade level book, but read a series called The All Fall Down, and like every single book, I'm just like, this could not get any crazier. Like, what are they gonna add? And it wasn't like a book that I was just like in love with, but it was like kind of that curiosity of what could they possibly do next to create more chaos. So sometimes those books are just fun to read too.
I know we were running out of time, so I know you had a question and you had a question, so why don't you go first and then
You were both diagnosed early, and I'm a reading specialist in 3rd through 5th, and I unfortunately come across some parents who don't feel their child has a problem. What else do you think I could say to them to convince them? Like, I want their child to have an evaluation. They won't sign the paperwork. And from a teacher perspective, it's like, we're trying to help as best we can, but I think that's what we have all that are things that we can do. So is there anything else you think we could be saying to help convince those parents?
I think this is a really hard one. I got really lucky because my parents were really supportive. My mom's a teacher, so she really kind of knew what I was going through. But a lot of parents really don't, and I think it's hard for them to accept that things are going to be harder for their child. And I'm sure it's hard because they probably need time to process that their child isn't going to learn like everyone else, but at the same time, while that's happening, their child's falling behind. So I can't imagine what you're feeling about that. I'm not necessarily sure. Do you think that?
The only thing that I could add to that is my dad, we're almost positive, has dyslexia, and for a very long time he really didn't think that I had that big of a problem. So I feel like a lot of times when parents kind of have a learning disability themselves, they think that it's normal because that's what they know. To like struggle that much or to kind of have that mindset. And like that's the only thing I can think of that might be something like my dad has kind of come around to just kind of thinking a little bit more that he probably has dyslexia and kind of like thinking that, but I know early on that he was like, I don't think you have that much of a problem, and then it kind of like escalated once I was really like trying to do my best, and really he saw me struggling. So I think in those like first few years it might not be as apparent, but I think sometimes when parents struggle, they're like, it's normal.
So I'm a parent of a middle school boy who was recently diagnosed with dyslexia, and so I just wondered, either one of you ever had a mentor who had dyslexia? Because, I mean, if you're a parent, you know that usually your kid does not enjoy working with you, and I was just wondering if you had a mentor, or if that was helpful, or something that you thought would be helpful.
So it was really nice for me because I did go to a school where a lot of kids were also dyslexic. This was the Crossroads school that I went to. So I didn't necessarily have a mentor per se, but I did have a lot of kids who were really kind of feeling the same as me. I would say it's hard because you can't just like go around and ask and be like, hey, do any of your friends have learning disabilities?
Or like a support group.
Yeah.
I feel like it's kind of a lonely journey. Even your
Yeah.
parent doesn't really understand exactly.
Well, it's interesting with organizing the conference. We have the later session for adult dyslexics, and I thought there might be just a few people who came. It's one of the most popular sessions because I think the people who went through years ago, nobody was coming out and saying, hey, I have this issue, or maybe they weren't identified. And so it's a huge session. And I think that desire for having some sort of conversation with other people who have the same struggles is really there for this group of students. And even though they're put in maybe some special reading group or whatever, as far as I know, to talk about what their struggles are and the challenges are isn't something that happens in there, or it doesn't. So
From my experience, when I was in public school and I was going to reading specialist, we weren't talking about our issues, we just all felt different. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's interesting because like I've never had like a mentor that was dyslexic that was like, oh, okay, you think this and you should kind of like this will help you. But I have a lot of friends with dyslexia or learning disabilities, and like my best friend since I was like 9 has, I think, dyscalculia. Her parents told her it was dyslexia, but she struggles with math and not reading, so we kind of figured that out. But it's interesting because you kind of get that sense of like, you understand that like I've struggled with the past and you felt the same way I've felt. So even if it's just like your peers, there's like something about it, especially like sitting down with someone who has dyslexia, and like I will ask people who I know have dyslexia, I'll be like, do you have a least favorite word that you like hated as a child? Because you remember from childhood just sitting down and just being like, UV, and like that's not at all how it's spelled, and just like hating it because for years you just couldn't spell it. That's my thing. But there's little quirks that I think everybody carries around from like their past with dyslexia, and it's just kind of nice to just be like, I understand that maybe it's not exactly the same thing, but like I get that, and for like the first time you're just like, oh, okay, like this person understands, this person understands. It's not just me, it's kind of like it makes you feel better, but it's not per se like giving other people advice on what to do, but I think it is helpful because you can sometimes like share what works for you in terms of studying. Yeah.
Okay, we are out of time. I think we need to do the 3 block sessions. Thank you so much for attending.